Hi, I'm Liz and I was adopted. A year or so ago, I made a video about my thoughts on adoption culture and what I think is wrong with the way we view adoption in the US. The video did super well and people had a lot of questions, and for a while after, I thought I would do a story time where I shared my adoption story and answered questions that people left in my community tab. That was over a year ago. That was almost 2 years ago, and I never did the story time. And it's something that has been sitting in the back of my mind that I should probably do, but just haven't done. And every month goes by that I think, I'm gonna film that video, and I don't do it. Now is the time that I'm going to film that video. So welcome to a story time. I'm gonna get ready. It's a get ready with me in story time. So I'm gonna do my makeup, get my face ready, and tell you the story of my time in foster care, adoption, and answer some questions that were left in my community tab a long time ago, but we're getting to them today. If this is your first time on my channel, welcome. My name is Liz. I talk about whatever's on my mind. I like to show my lifestyle, the adventures I get up to in Florida, and occasionally some commentary videos about, as I said, whatever's on my mind. So you're in for a wild little ride because my channel is all over the place, but it is for me and what I enjoy, so I hope you're in for it too. My adoption story is not the ideal adoption story, and I don't know the vast majority of adopted kids in the US and around the world. I don't know how many have an experience similar to mine, but my story is my story, and I think it sheds a lot of light on the problems that I see in the foster care and adoption system in the United States. So understand that it is a very messy, complicated story. I will try to keep it as simple as possible. This story comes from my own childhood memories and what I have been told. It is very difficult to get legal documents. I have looked for them. When I was in college, I called the county where I was born in North Carolina and asked for a copy of the records, including who had parental custody of me, the dates that my parents' parental rights were severed, and like all the records of me in foster care. And I was told the records were expunged when I turned 18 and the county did not have a copy of those records to give to me. Very, very frustrating. And I am not the only minor who has experienced that. I have been told that by other minors who also went through the system, that they also have no access to their records because before you're 18 you don't know you need to request them. You might not be interested in them, and then after you're 18 to request them and not be given them is very, very frustrating. But it is a problem with, I don't know if every state in the US, but with a lot of record keeping in the United States. I was born in Wayne County, North Carolina, which is in Goldsboro, which it's a little less than an hour from Raleigh. It's a very rural county, and my people come from North Carolina. They have deep roots in North Carolina as poor white people. That's the easiest way to describe them. When I was a teenager, I was really interested in my ancestry DNA, so I looked into it and I traced our records back to the US Census Bureau to the 18th century, and they were all North Carolinians, and they all lived and died within an hour of North Carolina's East Coast. So we had very, very deep roots in East Coast North Carolina. I know nothing, absolutely zero, about my biological father's family because, as you will see, my biological father was a hot mess, and my biological mother's family had no interest in sharing his family life with me. So I know nothing about his family. I don't know his parents' name. I don't know his middle name. Maybe I do. Maybe I could find it. I don't know his parents' name. I don't know if he had siblings. I know nothing about the man, and I have been told nothing. And honestly, finding that information has never, well, it has. I asked my biological grandfather, and he told me, Elizabeth, there is no need for you to know that. That man was not good. I was the oldest of 3 siblings, and by my 3rd birthday, it was pretty clear there were problems, and my memories are hazy. I do remember certain things. I remember when my siblings were young, like babies, that my biological parents parked us at a gas station and then left. And the memory is, like, I'm sitting in the back of a car, and my siblings are crying, and I had no access to food or water, and I was upset because I couldn't help my sister stop crying. I have 2 younger sisters. In that memory, are they both born yet? I don't know. I have no clue. No clue at all. And there's also a memory of my biological father getting charged with the crime and us going to court and him standing before the judge and saying, hey, please don't sentence me to jail. I have a wife and young children at home and I would like to be home for them. My memory of that is being 4 or 5 years old and thinking, he's not around, so why is he telling the judge this? Like, he's lying. And I remember him like turning to my biological mother and starting to say something and her shushing me in court. It's a very strange memory, but I remember it. And these are not things I was told, because the people who lived through them with me I've never seen again. So it's kind of interesting that I remember. And I also remember in one house that we lived in, there was no food, and we peeled the paint off the wall. I remember with my younger sister, like peeling paint off the wall and eating it. And there are very, very few pictures of me before like being adopted, like from ages 0 to 9. And the pictures I have seen, my hair is incredibly thin, and what I remember is my hair falling out. I don't remember if it all fell out or it was just super, super thin. And apparently that was from the lead poisoning. And my great-grandparents ended up taking us to a doctor, and we had to get tested for lead poisoning, and I don't know if we got treated for it or not. I don't remember. I remember eating the paint and my hair being super thin, and like my grandma combing it and it just like coming out. This is confusing, isn't it? Sorry, it's confusing, y'all. So this is like my child. I'm trying to piece the picture together for you. That I was born 3 years later. I had a sister born, and then a year and 2 weeks after she was born, my baby sister was born. So I have 2 biological siblings. My biological mother went to get her tubes tied, is the story we were told, and when she did, they found out she was pregnant with her 3rd child. So that is why there's 3 of us. And my biological father, it's my understanding, he dealt drugs and he was a pimp. And I remember as a teenager my great-grandmother saying to my mother, you don't want to know what he did to the girls before we had custody of them. And that is like, I don't know what happened. I have very specific memories, the court story, my hair falling out story, a birthday before my siblings were around. I remember this birthday. For years I thought it was my first birthday, but it doesn't make sense to remember my first birthday. But I remember it was my birthday, and my mom, my biological mother, I'm trying to always call her my biological mother in this video to help differentiate. My biological mother sat me on the countertop and like rifled through these empty cabinets. There was no food until she found a box of Cheerios. I don't remember there being milk, and her pouring the box of Cheerios and like giving them to me for my birthday. And they were honey nut oat Cheerios. I specifically remember like the box, the color of the box, and them saying that, though I couldn't read, so how would I? That's a very strange, but I was like 2 or 3. I think I was 2 or 3. I don't know if my biological mother was pregnant with my younger sister at this time. For years, I thought this was my first birthday, but that just wouldn't add up that a 1-year-old would remember this. And I remember her handing me the Cheerios and then playing Patty Cake, Baker's Man with me as part of my birthday. And that is like a memory that sticks out to me. When my middle sister, the next memory, significant memory that stands out to me, I was 4 or 5 years old. I was very small because we were very malnourished, and I was in a playground with my biological father, and they had the fire hydrants that you like hold on and you go down. And I was 4 or 5 years old, and I was playing, and there was a big kid fire hydrant and a little kid fire hydrant, and I had gone down the little kid fire hydrant before, and I saw some older children coming, and I got scared, and I ran up the playground, like the steps, and there was the big kid fire hydrant, and I had not gone down the big kid fire hydrant yet. And I look behind me, and these older children are coming my direction, and I was scared of them. So I reached for the fire hydrant, and I was like, I'm gonna go down and get away. And when I reached, I jumped, but I was not holding. And so I jumped and landed on my stomach. And I remember my biological father picked me up. My biological mother was not there. And he took me, put me in the stroller, and he put my younger sister on top of me. So she is an infant/toddler at this point. And he rolls the stroller home, and the roads are dirt roads. And they were bumpy, like they had lots of sand and dirt on them. So the bump, and my stomach's hurting so bad in this memory. Like I was in pain, I'm crying, and I get home, my biological mother is not home, so we're in the house, and when she gets home, it's very, very dark out, and I'm on the couch in pain, and she comes over and stands over me and sees that I have my groin, there's this huge bubble that's swollen, and she said, turn to my biological father, why haven't you done anything? And he's like, well, I didn't know what to do. And she had to run across the street to a gas station in the neighborhood and used a phone at the gas station to call 911. And I remember going to the hospital, my biological grandfather coming, and he brought me the little game that you play fishing with, like a little fishing rod, and there was some sort of surgery. I remember being told, like, you're going into surgery and being scared and being told you're gonna live, like, it's fine. And that is like the sum of my memories in my biological parents' house. As I said, there are no records that I have access to, which is really, really unfortunate because my memory is blur and muddle, and what I've been told mixes up with what is probably the facts. So what I've been told is what I remember. What my great-grandmother told me, what my grandfather told me, these are things I remember, but they could be factually inaccurate because the stories they told me could be factually inaccurate. What my adopted parents know are stories they were told by my biological great-grandparents, so they could be factually inaccurate. None of us have access to the records. When I'm 4 or 5 years old, my biological sister is born, my youngest sister, and when she is 6 months old, she weighs less than 10 pounds and can't turn over. So either my biological grandfather or my great-grandfather, I don't remember which one, and I think they never really wanted to tell us because they felt like it was their fault that what happened next. They call CPS to report malnourishment and neglect, and when CPS arrives, we are then taken from our biological parents' custody, and it's my understanding custody is severed at that point for extreme neglect. And this is after multiple instances of neglect that should have put them in prison, like abandoning us in a car at a gas station and the police coming and having to find a grandparent to come take us from the gas station. And then I've also been told they abandoned, I don't remember this one, I've been told they abandoned us in the woods for 3 days, and my great-grandfather like searched for us for 3 days until he found the car at a state park or something. And it's my understanding they abandoned us to go on like drug binges, but like this is stuff I was told by my great-grandparents, like, and they died when I was a teenager, so I don't know, like, I don't know what's accurate or not, but there is a lot of instances of abandonment, which leads into my later being diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, which is when a child's connections are constantly severed and they experience abandonment, and it leads to RAD, which is an extreme diagnosis. Like, most kids are dying. Most people aren't diagnosed with RAD, and RAD is a severe emotional, it's hard to talk about, honestly. RAD is difficult, and a lot of it came from those instances, sorry y'all, I wasn't expecting to cry, those instances of abandonment that happened until I was 5 years old, and beyond 5 years old. Anyway, I am moved into my great-grandparents. This is when I'm told that I am in foster care. From my understanding, they are technically a foster parent and they have legal custody of us, and I am enrolled in kindergarten at this point in Goldsboro, and I had my little kindergarten graduation. That was the happiest year of my life, was when I lived with my great-grandparents. And they are not wealthy people. They live in like a trailer park area, and multiple of their children live with them. The reason my grandfather cannot take custody of us is he is disabled at this point. He has also been to prison. I don't know why he went to prison. I just remember him telling me he went to prison. And he has a history of substance abuse, so he cannot take custody of us. My great-grandparents are old. They're older people. And they're doing their best. And this is my biological mother's parents and grandparents. My biological mother's grandmother I never met. When my biological mother was 11, my biological grandfather and his wife divorced. She remarried someone else, and when my biological mother was 11, that new man shot her to death. And I have seen the records of that from the Goldsboro paper, like, man shoots wife 7 times, and that is her story. That's all I know about. I don't even know her name. I think I could find it. But like, I don't know anything about her other than that she was killed by her second husband, and my biological mother was 11 when that happened, and that deeply traumatized her. And my biological grandfather was not equipped to take full custody of his only child, and there was a lot of tension in that relationship and bad stuff that happened. And he had gone to prison, I don't know if before his ex-wife's death or not, I don't know. This is more emotional than I like was prepared to be. But anyway, we're gonna keep talking. Whew. So I'm living with my great-grandparents, and it's happy, we're good. My biological parents had visitation rights every 2 weeks, and there were multiple times, and they weren't allowed to come to the house, but they were allowed to meet us at the church that my great-grandparents were members of, and we went to that church every other Saturday for visitation, and they would occasionally come. I was also a very happy child. I loved church, I loved Sunday school. I performed in Sunday school plays. I remember show and tell at kindergarten, and I had a doll from Rugrats, the like blonde brat in that show. Rugrats was my favorite show. It's also at this time that it's increasingly clear that I have inherited my biological grandfather's vision, and they take me to the doctor and I start wearing big thick glasses and my hair starts coming in. It's short, but it's there, and I'm a happy-go-lucky child. Like, yes, I have traumatic issues, but I don't remember it being like a problem. Like, I'm living and I'm happy with my grandparents, my great-grandparents, but I love them and I'm happy with them. But in that year that I lived with them, my great-grandfather had a stroke or a heart attack, not really sure which one, and his child, who lived in Texas, who I had never met, my grandfather's sister, my great aunt, was concerned that having the 3 great-grandchildren living with him was causing her dad physical issues. So as the school year wraps up, I'm called into the living room and someone hands me the phone and they're like, oh, talk to them. I answer the phone and they're like, hey, you're going to live with us. So I was like, who is this? And I said, huh? And they were like, say yes ma'am and yes sir on the phone. I remember this. And I was like, no one's ever told me to say yes ma'am and yes sir. But I was like, yes sir. I answered. I was a good kid. I did what I was told. I say I was a good kid. And it was like, I'm your Aunt Mary, I'm your Uncle Pat, you're gonna come live with us. And after I graduated from kindergarten, you know, the little kids and their graduations, my great-grandparents are going to fly us to live with my great aunt in San Antonio. It's May, it's warm, it's beautiful spring though, and I am being told I'm moving to Texas, which I've never heard of before. I'm 5, like what? And I'm told, like, your biological parents have the chance to come to visitation and say goodbye, and then you'll see them later in your life, like you see them again. So I go to the church with my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my grandfather, and we're sitting in the church gym, like waiting for them to come say goodbye, and they aren't there. They don't come. And I am getting restless. We're children, and my grandma says, why don't you go play in the courtyard? So I run out to the courtyard. I'm playing, I'm skipping. I remember it being green everywhere, like there's green things everywhere, and very sunny. And then my grandfather comes out, my grandpa Clint, and he comes up to me, and I remember running, and he picked me up and like lifted me in the air. And as he did, I realize that my biological parents are not coming. And as he sets me down, I must have said like, oh, are they not here? And he says, no, it's time to go, but you'll see them again later. And as I left the courtyard area, as I'm walking away, I don't know if I said anything out loud, but in my mind, in my heart, I said goodbye. I said goodbye to my biological parents. Like, that was the end of that story. I was like, they're not coming to this place, Texas, that I'm going to. There's no way I'm seeing them again. They did not come. I will not see them. And later in life, when I'm an older teenager, when my great-grandmother passes away and my mom, my adopted mom, offers to take us to the funeral, and I asked who's gonna be there, and I was told, your Aunt Mary and your biological mother will probably be there. I said, I'm not seeing my biological mother. Like, she had her chance and she chose not to show up, and I have never initiated contact with her. Like, that was my goodbye. And I know that's really harsh, but that was it for me. Like, there was no, I don't know. There's just, that's the way to describe it, is that was the end of that relationship for me personally. My great-grandparents take us to the airport. This is before pre-9/11. So my grandpa walked with us. My grandpa Clint walked all the way with us to the airport gate, and I remember him hugging me. And to describe my grandpa Clint, he's like everything to me. at this time, and through a lot of my adult time until he passed away when I was like 19. He meant everything to me. Yeah, so he takes us, he said goodbye, and oh, this is so much harder than I expected. Gosh. Sorry, y'all. It's crazy. He took us to the airport. We got on the plane. I remember it being dark in North Carolina when we left, and as we're on the plane, of course, I was so excited to see all the land. Like, I was like, I've always loved planes. Well, this is the first time I've been on a plane, but I was like, I'm gonna see everything. I knew that there was like land and people in between North Carolina and Texas, and I was like, I'm gonna look out the window and see all of it. And I remember fighting with my younger sisters to like sit in the window, and my great grandma was like, Elizabeth, you're being crazy, but like, let me sit in the window, because I was like, I'm gonna sit in the window. I don't remember my younger sisters after I got in the window. Like, I don't remember their reactions to anything. I don't know if they cried, like, I don't remember. And I get in the plane and I open the window, I'm so excited, and then it's clouds. And I remember being like, this is a scam. Like, I was so excited, and then there was just clouds, and I was like, okay, this is a scam. I just remember being heavily disappointed at 6 years old. And then as we landed in San Antonio, my grandmother said, oh, look out the plane window again. And I was like, why? There's just clouds. But then I looked out and I saw all of San Antonio as we landed at the airport, and I was so excited because this is what I expected to see like the whole trip. I'm making sure I'm recording still, silly me. So we get to San Antonio, and I often say, like, the first 5 years of my life, there is of course trauma. But I think my brain does a really good job of blocking the worst trauma, and just significant moments that stand out to me aren't necessarily traumatic. Some of them are hard and like define me as a core person. Like saying goodbye to my relationship with my biological parents, my sisters and us being abandoned in the car and feeling helpless and not able to help them, and like I'm failing as a big sister. That is like a core memory. My birthday and Patty Cake Baker's band being my birthday present, that's a core memory. But the really, really bad, harsh things that happened, I think my brain blocks them out, which is good. So I don't think of the first 5 years of my life as unhappy or bad. They were what they were, and my great-grandparents, the court giving us to my great-grandparents as our foster parents was like wonderful. They loved me. When I arrive in San Antonio, I say I like walked into hell on earth. That's the only way to describe it. My great aunt, I think I've already said her name, Mary, so there's no use trying to hide her name now. Anyway, she's an evil person, so who gives a F if I try to hide her name. That's the only way to describe her. And for years, people in my life have tried to justify her treatment of me. I've been told that maybe she disliked us because she blamed us for my great-grandfather's stroke, her dad's stroke, and that she blamed us as kids. I've been told she wanted to protect her own children and her reputation, and I understand there may be reasons that she treated us the way she did, but the way she treated us was wrong. And I don't know how much I can say on this video. I really don't. It's hard, it's difficult. Oh, yeah, so when I walked into her house, I don't remember ever calling her mom or anything like that. I think I just called her Aunt Mary the whole 4 years I lived with her. She had three children, and one son who is in late teens, and then an older daughter who was at college, and then her youngest daughter. So I had 3 cousins who lived with them. I don't remember ever realizing they were my cousins. And she quickly separated my 2 siblings and I. She said that I was dangerous, angry, and animalistic, and could not be trusted around my siblings. I don't remember any of this. She says anytime we were playing, that I would like react when they would try to take toys from me, and that I would like bite them and hit them. I don't remember doing any of that, and I remember a lot of things, so I think I would remember attacking my younger sisters. And to give you some examples of how isolated we were, when I was later rehomed, or adopted, as I often say, when my sisters came to live with me, they did not know I was their sister. They said the 3 or 4 years I lived with Mary, they knew I lived with them, but they did not realize we were siblings. So that is how isolated I was from my own siblings. So we moved in with them in the summer, and I started first grade. They were super religious. They went to an Assemblies of God church, and they were constantly saying that I was cursed, like generational curses from my biological father, who everyone in the family hated. They blamed him for what had happened. And I was constantly told that I acted like him, that I looked like him. He is a redhead. I'm the only redhead in the family, so you could see how that would happen. I also inherited his vision, which he's legally blind, and so that was constantly brought up. And when I went to church, I tried to conform. I tried to do, you know, it was a mega church. Like my foster dad, uncle, whatever you want to call him, worked the sound system for the children's church, so I went to 3 services a day, not including the evening. So we were there a lot of hours, and I just tried to conform. I always have. And I quickly realized that they thought the Rugrats were evil, so I gave them my Angelica doll, finally remember her name, and they burned her in the backyard because they said she was demonic. That is just like the religious trauma mixed in with there. It was a church that spoke in tongues. It was a apostolic, or I don't remember the word, but highly religious, highly crazy, and a lot of my religious skepticism comes from that church experience. It quickly became apparent that her son, my cousin, was messed up. He started abusing me, and for I think a year, it was not clear that he was doing that to the family, but when it became evident that he was abusing me, I was blamed, and I was specifically told, like, you're a whore, you're just like your biological father. And there was no effort made to protect me. Instead, I was punished because of the abuse, and then eventually, and just further isolated from the family, like constant isolation, and that did nothing to protect me from the older teenager who was harming me. I did try to tell a school teacher in 3rd grade, and it didn't really go anywhere. I think it's because I was too scared of him, so I just told her bad things were happening, and when she pushed for like more information, there was nothing that came of it. They did take me to a therapist, but my foster uncle would sit in the therapist office, so anytime I wanted to like actually tell the therapist what was going on, my uncle was sitting right there, and I felt like I couldn't really tell her because my uncle and aunt would call me a liar and say that I was the one who had tempted my cousin, and so I couldn't really like talk to anybody. And I was told I was demon possessed and all these other things that I was told at the church. My great aunt would say she could read my mind and that I was evil, and I would be like woken up in the middle of the night and physically punished. And I would say it wasn't punishment, it was literally torture. They would use like wall sits, which is a form of exercise. I did wall sits and mountain climbers. To this day I struggle doing mountain climbers. They would set a timer for like 30 minutes, and you have to do mountain climbers and if your knees touch the ground, they would reset the timer and things like that to try to like drive me to physical like exhaustion, I guess is the word. I don't know. I was also heavily medicated. I was diagnosed with bipolar and PTSD and like other things. I don't have bipolar. I do have PTSD, or I did have PTSD, but I did not have bipolar. And then I was given like high bipolar dosages. My great aunt would go to the doctor and be like, medicate her as much as possible. We don't want to deal with her. And then at one point my hair grew long enough to put in a ponytail, and so my great aunt was like, put your hair in a ponytail. I couldn't figure out how to put my hair in a ponytail, so she took me to a hair salon and told them to shave my head. And I remember the lady was Hispanic, because this is San Antonio and there's a lot of Hispanic people, and her heavy accent as she's like begging my aunt to not do that to me. Like she's like, this girl has beautiful hair, like it's an unusual color. Like I was bright orange at this point in my life, and she was like crying because she was like, I don't want to shave your head. And my aunt being like, shave it, like I just want it all gone. Yeah. Sometimes I think it's like because my biological father was a redhead that they like hated me because we looked the same. Anyway, so I lived with them for 3 years, and it was horrible. As I've described, it was really bad. And throughout the 3 years, my great aunt was constantly trying to get rid of me. So she would tell people at church that she was looking for a new home. She said that she called CPS every week to try to get them to take me. But according to Texas, I don't exist in their system. Like, parental rights were severed in North Carolina, but that didn't transfer to Texas. And because they didn't go to court or something, I don't understand. Like, all I know is that eventually, when I was rehomed, my new parents had power of attorney. So did my great aunt have official custody or just power of attorney? I don't know. She had to have power of attorney because we were enrolled in public school and we were taken to the doctor and had medication. She also said that she was paid by the state for our care. I haven't seen any payments, and we did eventually get paperwork for my youngest sibling, that showed that she was paid like $12 a month, which is a ridiculously low amount. It's crazy how low that amount is. And so we know that happened, but we don't know about me. We don't know what kind of legal authority she had. She transferred power of attorney over to my adopted parents. That's the only thing we know. And I would rather, like, I would really rather, I'm not contacting her. I have Facebook mutual friends with her. I've seen her. I know she's still alive, but I just have no interest in speaking to her. And I don't want to follow up and ask her anything about anyone or any legal. Like, I'll just be in ignorance. Yeah. Also, side note, for years I thought 9/11 was my fault because of her. Because the day 9/11 happened, we were of course sent home early from school, and I should be able to look at a calendar and know if I was in 1st or 2nd grade, but I don't remember. So if I was born in 94, 9/11 was 2001. I think I'm 7, if I'm doing the math right. So I probably was in 2nd grade. But I was sent home. I have no clue what's going on. I walk into my great aunt's bedroom and she has the TV on, and I see the towers fall, like videos of the Twin Towers falling. And as I walk in, she like turns to me and she is upset. She's angry. And she's like, "This is all your fault." What is she saying is my fault? To this day, no idea what she's talking about. But 7 or 6-year-old me internalized that, and I thought it was my fault. And then several years later, I was at a 9/11 memorial. I think it was at my public school, so maybe 3rd grade, maybe the next year, maybe 2 years later. And they did like a flag raising ceremony, and they had the color guard, and they like played a tribute to it. And I remember watching it and thinking, this doesn't make any sense. Like, this is definitely the video I saw on the TV that made her mad at me, but I had nothing to do with this. And thinking, I don't know what happened, but it wasn't my fault. Like, I remember thinking, I don't know what she's talking about. I didn't have anything to do with this. And I don't think I knew what happened until I was like 12 or 13, and like my mom was showing me pictures on Facebook of like it was like the 5-year anniversary, and she was like talking about it, and I was like looking at pictures. This is right after Facebook, so maybe it's the 10-year anniversary. And I was like looking at these pictures. I said, so who did this? What happened? And I remember realizing 100% sure I had nothing to do with this. So really weird, really weird way to remember 9/11 as a child. And that's my great aunt Mary. Thank you, great aunt Mary, for that. So after living with her for 3 years, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that she does not want me to live with her, that she is trying to get rid of me. Like, I live within anticipation of CPS picking me up every single day. I've run away from her home once, and I was returned by the police, and I am mentally begging CPS to take me. Like, I was like, I'm going to die in this house, or somebody is going to get me out. And I have, as an adult, I have never like felt suicidal depression. But at 7 and 8 years old, I did. And I was just like, I want to die. I don't want to live here. When I don't remember eating in that home ever. The only time I ate was at school, which was breakfast and lunch every day. Every night when I would sit down to eat dinner with her family, somehow I would get in trouble and get sent from the table without getting to finish my food. Like, it was constant. It was just like nightmare. And as I said, it was hell on earth to live in that household. And she did not want me living in her household. It was constantly reminded, as much as you can tell a child, I don't want you living with me, and I'm going to make your life miserable because you live with me. And eventually, I'm just glad I didn't live with her the rest of my life. But her older daughter was at college and she got engaged, and at her wedding, how do I describe this without being overcomplicated? Her daughter gets married. Her future son-in-law's mother is at the wedding. Her son-in-law's mother is my adopted parents' neighbor. And I don't want to dox anyone. We're gonna call her Stephanie because there's no one in my life named Stephanie. So Stephanie sees the situation. She's not 100% clued in, but she knows that it's messed up. And she's like, who is this little girl that's not allowed to sit with her family during the wedding, who's not allowed to have wedding cake, who's not allowed to eat with the family, who's being treated like little orphan Annie, but worse. And she's like, this is terrible. And her hair is all cut off too. That's also something that really bothered Stephanie. So she asks around, and eventually my Aunt Mary says to her, oh yeah, that's my niece, my great niece, and I don't want her to live with my family. I'm trying to get rid of her. So Stephanie returns to her home, and my parents are her neighbors. So she walks across the street and says, oh my goodness, I have found a child for you. My parents had gone through years of trying to have more children. They had even gone to a Baptist home, an orphanage, and asked about adoption, and then been told it was like how much they were going to charge. And my dad said, I'm not buying a child, and decided that that was not an option they would pursue. My mom was very upset because for years she had wanted to adopt, and when they showed up at the orphanage and then my dad said, I'm not buying a child, and walked out when he was told it would cost $10,000, my mom felt like her dream was crushed. Like this was the end of the road for her. And then Stephanie shows up at her house and says, I have a little girl that I think y'all should adopt. And my mom is like, no, Roy doesn't want to adopt kids. And she said, no, this little girl needs parents. She needs saved. She needs rescued. And talks to my parents because she's convinced they would be the perfect parents for me. And Stephanie, once she's convinced, can't talk her out of it, even to this day. And so eventually my mom and dad are like, okay, we'll think about it. And she gives them my aunt's number and is like, you need to call her and tell her that you are interested in adopting this little girl. So my mom calls my Aunt Mary, which is like terrifying to call a random stranger and say, hey, I heard you have a child that you want to get rid of. Basically is how that phone call went. And my Aunt Mary said, yes, but she's about to start 3rd grade, or was I about to start 2nd grade? I don't know, because the timelines are all mixed up, what I've been told. But she calls her, she says, you know, I hear you're trying to rehome a child. My aunt says yes, but she's about to start a new school year, so let's let her start the new school year and see how she adjusts. I don't, you know, maybe she'll finally settle in. My mom thinks that Mary said that because she felt like guilty for trying to get rid of me, especially talking to a random stranger on the phone, and she had not yet reached the point of desperation to hand her blood relative over to a random stranger, especially because her mom, my great-grandmother, would have been very upset at this point. So I live with my aunt for another year, I think, and then the next summer, Stephanie visits to see her new grandbaby that's been born, and the situation has continued to deteriorate, and she feels so awful that she goes back to my parents and is like, have you contacted Mary again, because that little girl cannot live with them any longer. And at that point my mom reaches out and Mary says, well, we'll think about it. Here's all the issues that we have with her and why we think you should not take her, because she's demon possessed and all these other things. And my parents said that she like talked to them on the phone for like 3 hours and like basically told them a bunch of crazy stories about me, and my parents were like, is a child even capable of all these things that this lady is saying that this child has done? And that was like in the fall. So Mary said, I will call you back and let you know when you can take her. So my mom hangs up and is waiting for them to call her back, and they don't do it. So Christmas comes, January, and then Stephanie then again visits for the holidays, is very upset by the whole situation, goes back to my parents and says, once again, Sharon, you need to call Mary. Like, this child is going to die if you don't get her out of this house. So my mom calls Mary, and Mary says, okay, yeah, when can we meet? And Valentine's Day was the day that seemed the most appropriate day because we had Monday off for President's Day weekend. So my parents live in the Dallas area. My great aunt lived in San Antonio, so they met halfway in between in Waco, and her daughter lived in Waco at the time. So I showed up at her daughter's house, and her daughter was an even bigger bully than my great aunt. Like, my cousin Melody took everything her mother did and like tripled it. So I was like, not only did she like, she just was a horrible person. So I showed up at my cousin's house that we're gonna stay for the weekend, and I was like, I'm gonna go hide. So I like find a little corner in the living room, and I'm just gonna like read my book and be as hidden as possible as a 9-year-old can be. And all of a sudden this lady walks up to me and she says, hi, are you Elizabeth? I'm like, yes. And she said, oh, I would love for you to come over and talk to me. So I like walk over to this random stranger, and she's like, I'm Sharon, this is my husband Roy. She points him out, and she said, we would love if you stayed at our hotel for the weekend. And I was like, getting away from these people? Absolutely. And I was like, oh yeah, let me grab my bag. And my parents said they had never expected that I would immediately be like, yes ma'am, take me away. So I grabbed my little backpack of stuff, and I stayed with them for the weekend at their hotel. No clue that these people are going to take me into their home. I just think they're friends, like they're random nice people. My dad says that weekend meeting me like changed his life. That he walked in being like, I don't know about taking a random stranger's child, and he left like, I'm her dad. Like, that was the moment that he said he fell in love with me. And my mom just felt bad for me. Like, they just felt bad. She just felt really bad in general. And she was like, these people hate this child, and it's clear, so we gotta get her out of here. So I spend the weekend with them, have the most wonderful time. They take me to the kids museum, to a different church that I've never been to before, and I just think they're wonderful people. And as the weekend ends, I go back with my great aunt and cousins, and we show back up in San Antonio. And my great aunt pulls me aside, and she said, those random strangers you spent the weekend with, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember them. She's like, they're gonna be your new parents. Now, most people might get freaked out if they're told like, these random strangers you just met are gonna be your new parents. But to me, I was like, oh, you've been trying to get rid of me for years. This makes 100% sense. So I was like, oh, that's great. And some of my aunt's recent behavior suddenly became like clear about why she was acting the way she was. For 3 years, this woman had constantly told me how much she hated me, how much she wanted to get rid of me, and all of a sudden she took me to the toy store for my 9th birthday and said, pick out a toy. And then I was like, is this a trap? And I like refused to pick out a toy until she like yelled at me, and I grabbed a random doll that happened to be twins from the shelf and was like, fine, this is my toy. And then we got home, and I don't remember doing anything, but she always said I did something, and she took the dolls and said, you can't have them. So I was like, why did you take me to the toy store, say that I could have a birthday present, and then take the dolls from me? Okay, like, I don't really care about those twin dolls anyway, so that's fine. But after she told me like, these new people will be your parents, she said, pack all your things. So I packed all my things, and she said, you're going to move in with them spring break, which was just a couple of weeks away. So Texas had just introduced standardized testing, the STAR testing system, which is still, well, I think they're trying to get rid of it, but still exists. And I love a standardized test, not gonna lie, love it. So I was obsessed with my little STAR testing practice test, and I actually scored the highest grade in the entire elementary school for the STAR test for reading. I don't know how well I did for math, but I do know I did well for reading. So the STAR testing is the week before spring break. So I do my STAR test, and then we're gonna pack my bags and go to Dallas. So as I'm packing my bags, I put the stuffed animal that I have lived with the past 3.5 years in her home into my backpack. Her name is Ellie the elephant. And in my great aunt's last act of vengeance, she takes the elephant and she said, "This isn't yours, this is my daughter's. Your grown-ass daughter, who has never noticed the elephant before, it's suddenly her elephant." And I remember being like, feeling dead inside, like she took my elephant. I still love Ellie, I still miss her. But she took my elephant and then she put the dolls that she had bought me for my birthday and then taken away from me in the bag. And she was like, "You tell Roy and Sharon this is your birthday present." And I was like, oh, I figured it out. You gave me the birthday present so that Roy and Sharon would think that you gave me presents, because you never gave me Christmas presents or birthday presents before. So this makes sense to me. And then we drive up to Dallas. It takes all day. It's like a 7-hour drive. And we showed up at my new parents' home, and we walk in. They made spaghetti. They brought it. They needed, my dad needed a second set of hands to move like the bed frame and mattress to my room. So when they showed up, they helped move in the bed frame and mattress. We eat spaghetti. I don't remember eating it, but I'm sure we ate it. And they drive off for the night. I spend the first night in their home, and I really deeply wish y'all could see this, but my mom has a scrapbook. She can't find it. I asked her for it. She has a scrapbook, and she has a picture of me of the first night in that bed. The 3 years I've lived with my great aunt, I slept on a couch in the living room. This is the first time I've slept on a bed since I was 5 years old, and I'm 9. Like, this is the first time I've had my own bed, my own pillow, my own comforter, like my own set of sheets. And I don't remember like knowing this is mine. But when I look at that picture, when I can see that picture in my mind, and I look so content in that bed, like I look happy asleep. And it's because I have a bed for the first time, and it's my bed in my own bedroom. It's like amazing. And then the next day, my great aunt comes to like and we go to a law office and they sign over power of attorney. So I'm officially rehomed, not adopted, I'm rehomed. So they sign over power of attorney, and my great aunt goes to give me a hug goodbye. And my dad says that is when he realized that he had only seen like a very happy child who was just like eager to please, eager to like hug everyone, be loved, and like embrace life. And that is the moment he realized this child is broken, because my great aunt is like sobbing, crying, and because she was, I don't know her. So for some reason she's crying, and she goes to hug me, and I stiffen up, and I have my dad said he watched like my face close, and I went from like smiling happy to I closed down, like all emotion left my face. And as this woman is hugging me, I am not responding at all. And I didn't respond, and I remember feeling like, why are you hugging me? You hate me. Like, why are you caring that I'm leaving? I just want you to go away and never see me again. So that was the start of my life with Roy and Sharon. I don't really want to like talk about anything that went wrong. Roy and Sharon, I love them deeply. They're my parents. I called them, I remember the first week in their home. By the end of the first week, I asked, "Can I call you mom and dad?" And they said yes. My dad said, like, he had been told it would take years for me to call them mom and dad. So for me to immediately be like, "You're my mom and dad," who I hadn't called anyone mom and dad for years, stood out to him. They had done everything possible to like be the right parents. They had read all the books on reactive attachment disorder and emotional trauma. They had read books on adoption. They knew the problems that were present with adopting a kid, but they also were not prepared at all because they didn't have a good support system. They were in the Institute in Basic Life Principles cult, which is the same cult as the Duggars if you're unfamiliar, and they were indoctrinated into that cult. So, and the cult also taught that adoption was bad. So it's kind of weird, they're in a cult but they're adopting a kid. They always went my dad loves to go against the grain. That's just gonna say that. And they did everything they could, even like to the best of their ability. I have a lot more grace for them because they didn't act out of hatred. They were misguided. They didn't have a good support system. They were surrounded by people who gave them bad advice. and by people who didn't know how to properly support people who adopt kids. And also, I was deeply emotionally traumatized. I had PTSD, reactive attachment disorder, and ADHD. So what are you gonna do with that? No one's gonna properly react. I'm just gonna say. And they weren't prepared. So there was a lot of harm in their home. There was, but they loved me, which was something that I had not had for most of my grandparents loved me. I had love in their home when I had not been loved in the previous 4 years. But unfortunately, when I'm talking about adoption, I was not adopted. They got power of attorney, and then they went to a lawyer and they said, so how do we adopt her? And the lawyer said, well, you need to get the proof that parental rights were severed for the state of Texas, and they needed to go to court and then adopt her. So they tried to get proof that parental rights were severed, but according to Texas, parental rights were not severed. So and nobody knew that, like, the next step that you needed to do, like, how do you go to North Carolina and get, like, what records do you need from North Carolina? They took me to North Carolina to see my great-grandparents because they thought it was important, and they were right, to keep me in contact with my biological relatives who loved me, which was my great-grandparents and my grandfather. And my great-grandparents, they were like, okay, we need records for, like, the proof of parental rights being severed and, like, her foster care records and all of that. And my grandparents were like, oh, we gave all of that to Mary. So Mary's not giving them anything but power of attorney, so they had no more records to go. So they go back to the lawyer in Texas, and the lawyer in Texas says, well, if you don't have access to these records, my next suggestion is that you wait until she is older than 14 and she can go to a judge and say, hey, I've lived with these people since I was 9, I'm happy with them, and I would like to be adopted. And the judge can rule in favor of adoption. So my dad said, okay, we'll wait till she's 14 and we'll do that. He had no doubt that I would be happy to tell a judge that I wanted to be adopted. 3 years after I move in with them, they get my sisters. So my sisters are living with my great aunt, and there is abuse definitely happening, but they have a much better relationship with my aunt. She did not resent them in the way that she resented me. I don't understand. Some of that is my baby sister was literally a baby when she got her, and she, like, bonded with her, and my baby sister thought that my great aunt was her mother. She did not know until after they moved in with us that she was not her mother. So she's been living with them for 3 years. They have been living with my great aunt the whole time I've been living with my new parents, but my great aunt is also trying to rehome them. During the summer, my great aunt would drop them off. My mom describes it as they visited for 2 weeks the first summer, a month the second summer, and the third summer they stayed forever. The first summer, the first 2 weeks, is like glorious. I love my sisters, so happy they're with me. The second summer, it's harder because they start shopping them around. And this is not a slight on my parents. They're doing what they've been asked to do by my great aunt. They take them to different homes, friends who are also looking to adopt children, and we would have, like, play dates at these people's houses. And I, being older, recognize that the reason these people are bringing their family friends over to visit with our family is because they're looking to adopt kids. So they're, like, wanting to see how their children will interact with my younger sisters to see if they would be willing to adopt them. And it's like rehoming shopping. I'm not really sure. It's really gross in my opinion, but it is something that at that time was commonly done, and I think is still done in rehoming circles. And over and over and over again, people would say to my parents, we would love to adopt the youngest, but the middle girl obviously has behavioral issues, so we're not as interested in her. And my mom, it breaks her heart because she can see that my two sisters are very, very bonded together, and that taking them apart to rehome them into 2 separate homes will emotionally break both of my sisters. And they are so close in age, they're only 1 year and 2 weeks apart, and they have lived through a lot of hard trauma together, and my middle sister has become very protective of my baby sister. And a lot of people think they're twins. They are that close. They really were bonded. And my mom does not want to see them separated, so she keeps fighting to find a family who will take both girls. And my great aunt has said multiple times that she doesn't think they should live with me, so she never thinks, none of us think, that my great aunt will let them live with us. The third summer they come to stay for the summer, and when my great aunt dropped them off, I don't know, did she plan to leave them forever, or was she hoping to pick them up? Halfway through the summer, she calls my mom and she says, I've decided y'all are fine. I'm just gonna leave the girls with you. And my mom said, well, don't you want to like come say goodbye and explain the situation to them? And my great aunt said, no, I don't want to do that. So my parents sit us down and they said, so we have news. And I remember I was delighted when I was told that my sisters were going to live with us forever. I was like beyond happy. This is what I wanted for 3 years. I had like prayed every single night that my 2 sisters would come move in with us. And my sisters were not so delighted. They thought they had been lied to. They were like, she dropped us off, said I'll see you later, and then didn't come and get us. And the rest of their life, to this day, I think, they're still pretty upset about that. Or they weren't necessarily upset that they were living with us. They were upset that my aunt didn't do it herself. Like, she didn't come say goodbye or do anything like that. And then my aunt visited, not us, but her grandchild lived in the same town as us because her daughter had moved up to our town. So she came and visited, and when she did, she brought the power of attorney paper. She signed that over to my parents, and my parents again went to the lawyer, said, what's the next step? The lawyer said, wait till they're all older and then go to court and ask the judge to, like, for the girls to vocally say we want to be adopted, and then you can adopt them. My dad wanted to do that, but my middle sister, there's multitudes of problems, and she is very, I don't know how to describe it. She was never happy, and she has bipolar and other issues. It's hard to describe. There were so many hard moments growing up with her in our parents' home, and my dad, all of us knew that if we went to court and the judge asked, do you want to be adopted by these people, that she would say no. So we just didn't do it because we were afraid of what she would tell the judge. And when she got old enough, she ran away multiple times because she wanted CPS to take her and put her in like a group home. I think she wanted that. Like, none of us really, it's hard to understand what she wanted. At least as a teenager who remembers all this, it's hard to understand. So that is the story of how I was rehomed and not adopted. And I still to this day say that I was adopted. It's just easier, and I consider it an adoption. When I was 19 and got my passport and photo, no, I wasn't getting my passport. When I was getting my driver's license, or even my photo ID, I guess my learner's permit, and I was getting ready to go to college at age 20, so I was 19 going into 20, I did not want my last name to be my biological parents' last name. That thought, it had been that last name for years, and I just really, really hated it. So I told my parents that, and we went to court, and we told them that I legally wanted to change my last name. We changed my first and middle name. I went from Elizabeth Marie to Faith Elizabeth, and nobody ever called me Faith though. I always went by Elizabeth. It was just a more symbolic thing than anything else. And we just told the judge, like, I've lived with these people, I consider them my adopted parents, and I would like to change my last name to align with theirs. And it was kind of like an adoption, but not. It was a legal name change. They're not legally my parents. They're not even legally my guardians. They were given the power of attorney. So when I went to college, I signed the paperwork that, yeah, I was in foster care, because in my mind I was like raised in foster care. And when I was filling out the FAFSA, I signed that, and that's when I learned that I was never officially like registered in the Texas foster care system. And that's when I reached out to North Carolina and said, hey, where's the proof that I was registered in the North Carolina foster care system, which I had been told by my great-grandparents that I was. And the state said, oh, we expunged those records, so we have no access to any foster care records of yours. And I said, well, that's problematic because I need paperwork for the FAFSA. So I went back to the FAFSA office and was like, what paperwork can I give you? They said, well, what paperwork do you have? And I said, well, the only piece of paper I have is the power of attorney paper. And they said, oh, that's fine, because they're not your legal parents on your birth certificate, and they have power of attorney, so that proves that you were in foster care. And I was like, okay, so give me money. Like, I just needed that paperwork to qualify for federal grants for the FAFSA, and that's what I got. So yeah, that is the story. It's complicated. I can't believe I've just talked for like 45 minutes, and I can't believe I got emotional. Oh, that was a lot. Anyway, I hope y'all learned, I guess, from listening to this. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Questions. Oh my goodness. I don't know if I can do questions now. I don't know if I can. People definitely asked questions in my community tab. So maybe if you have follow-up questions from this, I'll do a Q&A after. I really thought this would be like 20-minute story time and 20-minute Q&A, but this has been like an hour-long story time, and I don't think I have the emotional capacity to read and answer questions now. So I'm gonna wrap the video here. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this was insightful, good, whatever words you want to use. And I appreciate everybody for asking questions in my community tab. I hope to do a Q&A and follow up and actually answer the questions. And please, if you have further questions, drop them in the comments, because I would love to provide as much insight as I possibly can, or clarification as possible, into what I know of adoption, rehoming, and the foster care system, and the flaws I see in the system that I think are pretty manifest through my life. And I appreciate all of you for being here. Thanks for watching, and you can always check me out on Substack. I should drop my links. Instagram, I'm very active on there. TikTok, super active on there. And I appreciate everyone who subscribes and joins in on my online community. And I'll see you guys all around the internet. See ya.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service.